evening and welcome to the Mac and Chuck Show with your co-hosts Scott McKenzie and Chuck Hill. Tonight's special guest is Pastor Jesse Petter.
Good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we doing tonight, guys?
Trying to stay cool. How about you? The antithesis of cool?
Pretty much. I'm working on it, though. I am out in the studio tonight, despite the sweltering heat, but I've got the door open, the other door open, and a fan blowing on me. And I've got my rayon shirt on, so I'm living in the 90s, kids. I'm living in the 90s.
Well, you still have the drug rug, so I guess that's true to a degree.
I do have a drug rug. It's the only one I own, but it is what it is. I actually kind of like it. So, how's your week been, Cherry, Mac?
It's all right. Work was chaotic. Yes, it's been warm.
I can imagine, man. That warehouse. Is there any kind of conditioning system in there at all?
Oh, the one I'm at now, there is, baby. It's climate controlled because of chocolate.
Nice.
55 degrees year round.
Sweet.
Maybe I'll get a job there too, because it's hot in this house.
Which kind of leads me to my random thought.
No, please share.
Nice segue. Didn't going outside as a kid, we were not impacted by the heat at all that I remember. Not like, like this, you step outside, you're like, you become a puddle of ooze on the concrete. Never affected us like this as kids. I don't know if it's because we went outside playing all the time or if we were thinner.
Right, because we were thinner. Because I'm telling you right now, after my stint at Ponderosa and Little Caesars and I ballooned up by 80 pounds.
Balloon!
Trust me. Well, when I bounced out that door and that humidity smacked me in the face.
After Chuck was dribbled out the side door.
Oh my gosh, it was terrible. It was terrible.
The heat actually did bother me as a kid, but we won't. Yeah, but I'm special.
You are special, Sherry.
Special.
Yes,
you are.
Yeah. See, even your little ribbon there says number one.
Says I'm number one.
So I understand you had an interesting experience at KFC this week.
Oh boy, Lord.
That's funny.
Look at you guys cracking up about it. Man, I wish I would have taken pictures because Jim was out in the car, so I walked out there.
You had Debo in the back,
dude.
So I just went, the food not edible because of the armpit hair that was in your chicken, or what?
No, because honestly, it literally was inedible. It just was not good. It was rubbery. Okay, can we discuss chicken as rubbery?
I think they were cooking the wrong chicken. If it was rubbery.
Well, that's all right.
I'm not sure.
Just go to Popeyes.
Just go to Popeyes. From now on, just Popeyes. I recommend Popeyes.
Yeah, well, that's what they told you, right?
Dude, and he had to be management because he was in there, waiting for change or something like that. So, I mean, if that's your manager, whatever.
Sit back let's see.
It's funny because I do kind of agree with you. Like when we were younger, and now don't get me wrong, I'm sure that we all had our jackass moments when we were, in fast food or whatever, because, we didn't want to put up with customers. Dude, I worked there with you, so I'm fully aware just as much as you are me. But
but really I never spit in anybody's food.
You thought about it though, didn't
you?
Oh, I didn't spit in anyone's food.
I said I hadn't either. Now tell me something, Cherry. When you worked fast food, didn't you want to maybe, especially some unruly kids at a table, just kind of like add an extra topping or two?
Well, no, because I served. I didn't really work in fast food. I served the pizza. So, I mean, for me to be able to hawk a big one onto the pizza would have taken some creative genius that I don't.
Well, you do have that.
See, that just gives
now I could get away with it, but 16-year-old Cherry was not as swift.
And I can't even fathom someone doing that. You know, I mean, you see it.
On a burger?
Oh, I mean, come on. I mean,
Don't
even
you
as
remember
a kid,
the last time you ate over here? You're welcome.
that was delivery by Domino's, so I know better. Well, I don't know better, but you know,
somebody had to go out front and get it.
That's true. That's true.
That was
Very
not a
true.
mushroom.
Ew.
So tonight's show.
Moving on.
Anyway, anywho. So tonight's show, you know, it's kind of a show that we've been wanting to have for a while. We are waiting for another guest to come on, and they'll be on right about 10 after. But you know, we just kind of want to, you know, every month we have Jesse on, and he, you know, he always gives us, you know, some great insight as far as Christianity, the purpose of the church, and you know, answers questions that we have. What we thought on the show would be a great idea would just be to maybe have a different point of view. And so tonight's show is really kind of that. Jesse's going to come on, and then we're going to have another gentleman on, Nick. He's going to give us kind of the agnostic, and he described himself as an agnostic atheist. So I'm kind of hoping he can kind of clarify that a little bit for me.
Definitely.
But what I would also like tonight is, you know, take an opportunity tonight to ask Jesse, Nick, or us, or, you know, any questions, and you just kind of be, you know, interactive. And it's really about education as far as our show goes. I mean, it's about entertainment and looking at our semi-sustainable faces, appearance, I guess, you know, but
what?
But yeah, you know, we want to educate people and give people the opportunity to ask questions, and you know, if there are things that, you know, guests you'd like to have on the show, we want that also. We do ask tonight, though, that you be respectful of everybody's opinions. Everyone will, you know, be respectful of yours, and if they're not, then we'll give them the boot. That's one of the nice things about having the power over the buttons here. Or we'll have Cherry give them the boot. We can have Cherry give them the boot. But yeah, button. So we are going to bring Jesse on a little bit early because I'd like for him to talk a little bit about what's going on at Celebration Community Church. We got some pretty cool things coming up. So I think with that being said, let's go ahead and bring him on.
Well, hey guys.
There he is.
Great to be back on the show again.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Love having you here. How's your week been?
It's been hectic, but good. Yeah.
Well, we are technically over half the week, so now it's all downhill from here, right?
That's the hope. Now we've got a busy weekend coming up too. We are having, we're of all things, we're having a Gator Grill for Father's Day this weekend, Saturday. We're actually we purchased a gigantic, huge iron grill, and to christen that thing, we're going to cook an alligator in it. We've got a 5-foot alligator on the way here. Should be here tomorrow, and we'll be cooking that thing. We're also doing a crawfish boil, and we're going to have games and other things out there. So it's going to be a good time. And if you're watching, you want to come out and join us. We're going to be starting up around noon on this Saturday at Celebration Community Church.
Nice.
Might even have the opportunity, Jesse, to maybe throw some axes this weekend.
Oh yeah. We're gonna have axe throwing. We should have. I think we're gonna have washers and things of that nature too. So we'll have some games for people to come out and play as well. Oh. And thankfully, by God's grace, we're gonna have a little bit cooler temperatures this weekend, from what I understand. So
I was just looking at that, Jesse. It looks like the high for Saturday might be about 86.
So, I mean, I know we're talking about God and His existence tonight. I just want to say, as a point of proof here, number one, last weekend it was supposed to rain, and we had our vacation Bible school that all rounded up with an event we called the Sermon on the Mount, where we had Dr. Lou Starrett come out, and he did a demonstration of actually taming an unridden horse, and he related that to some gospel principles. But it was supposed to rain the whole time. We had a group get together beforehand, and we prayed, and we just prayed, God, hold the rain off for a little while, just so we can get done. And literally the moment that Lou got done and was packing up, it started pouring. So, and then this weekend, we prayed for good weather. So it looks like so far we're going to have good weather.
Nice.
Lisa says, crawfish boil.
I'm interested in throwing some axes.
Hey,
I don't know.
No, Cherry. You don't throw them at people. You throw them at a wall.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah,
right.
See,
You can't throw them
I just
at.
wanted to clarify that.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm good.
Okay, well,
You can't throw them at me, Cherry. At the board, not me, and I'm not standing next to the board.
Fine.
oh boy.
So Jesse, while we wait for Nick to come on, when the church has events like this, like what is the ultimate goal here? Like, is it just to bring people into the church, or like what is Celebration's primary focus as far as community outreach goes?
So, number one, we like to have some low impact events from time to time. This isn't the event where we're going to come and preach at you. We just really like to get to know you a little bit and connect with people. The hope always is, of course, that we'll end up making a connection with a person and be able to share some biblical truth with them. That's always our goal. But we want to just get to know people as well and let people know in the community who we are.
All right. Awesome. Well, I think
before
that
we bring them on, I wanted to address my question real quick. It's kind of like the bullpen session, the warm up before we get going.
Okay.
And stop me if I've asked this before. I don't recall, but we've heard you say on the show before that Jesus Christ is the way to God, and only through Him. How would you term it to someone else who is from another faith, like maybe Hindu, Buddhism, Islam, where they all pray to the same God, but they're not coming through Christ? Are they going to be saved, or are they just are they holy people? You know what I'm saying? It's really a dynamic that people really I don't think ask the right questions on that.
Sure. I think first we have to start with this saying, and there is an idea that all religions are the same, or all religions pray to the same God. But I'm trying to remember the guy who wrote it. He wrote an article in the paper one time. It was very interesting. He said, most people assume that all religions are the same. They only differ on matters of heaven, hell, salvation, and all of those things. Yeah. It's very misleading, actually, to say that we all pray to the same God. We would have to start there. Paul, when he in the New Testament, in Acts chapter 17, Paul, when he is addressing some of the Roman people, he's standing there on Mars Hill, and he had noticed that in the city there were statues of different gods here and there, and they even had a statue to an unknown God. And he said, "Listen to me, people of Rome, I see that you're a very religious people, and you even have a statue to this unknown God. But let me tell you about the God who's knowable." And I kind of would take a start there. Usually, I like to ask a lot of questions first about what a person believes about God. What experience they've had with the Bible, maybe even what kind of church experience they've had, because a lot of the times that colors a person's perception of who God is. But to answer your question straightly, Jesus himself said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me." And so I do draw a hard line there. They're not my words; they're Jesus' words, and I take them quite literally.
So I think that's really kind of a great time to kind of bring Nick on, and let's talk about this a little bit, because when Nick comes on, Jesse, what I'd kind of like to do is I'll tell you, I'm going to bring him on. I'll explain kind of what I'm thinking.
Sure.
Hey, Nick, you with us?
Yeah, I'm here, guys. How you doing?
Hey,
doing all right.
Yay.
Hey, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so everyone knows, this is not Nick Drago, who comes on Tuesdays.
No.
Totally different Nick. We know a bunch of Nicks, so what can we say? So, gentlemen, what I'd kind of like to do tonight is just kind of, take a respectful approach to your beliefs, why you believe the way you do, and maybe what kind of proof that has been shown to you that, causes you to have a firm belief the way that you do. Nick, I'd actually like to kind of start with you, because when we spoke about you coming on, you had mentioned that you were kind of an atheistic agnostic. Can you kind of go in a little bit about kind of what that entails as far as your belief goes? And then Jesse, we'll have you kind of come in, and then we'll just kind of start some dialogue.
Sure. Yeah, I can do my best to kind of explain what it means to me. I think that's kind of an important starting point, is understanding what not maybe the definition, the Merriam-Webster definition of words are, but what they mean to the person who's using them. So I would also like to get your guys' view on what those words mean to you. So for me, my understanding is that like the root word of agnostic or Gnostic would be, it's a Greek word, gnosis, which is just having knowledge of something. And so agnostic would be the absence of that knowledge. You just don't have the knowledge. And then atheist or theist, that would be either having a belief that God exists or gods exist, or the absence of that belief. So knowledge and belief are not necessarily mutually exclusive. You know, you can be both, and one can inform the other. So I'm agnostic because I don't really, I don't have any evidence to say that I know that I know this for a fact, that God exists. If I could know that for a fact, I'm open to it, and I, would be happy to hear how I could know. And there's a little more to that we can talk about on standards of evidence and things like that. But because I don't have knowledge of his existence, I then can't really make an informed decision on what to believe about it. So therefore, I have an absence of belief. There's just no belief either way.
I get it.
So, Jesse, if you would just, again, you're a professed Christian. Just kind of, talk about what that means to you, the evidence that you have that, you believe supports your belief, and, just kind of why you hold so fast to that belief.
Sure. First off, I'll just say that, I think that's a pretty good summary of what it means to be agnostic. Most agnostics that I've talked to identify very similarly. They say that they don't have any knowledge, and some would even go so far as to say that God is unknowable. And Nick, I don't know if you fall into that camp, so I don't want to paint you with a broad brush there. But that's been my experience, and I think that's a pretty good summary. As far as my faith goes, it's been a journey for me. As a young man, I was in church. As a slightly older guy, well, still a kid, really, I had a faith. I had a really kind of a falling out of my faith journey. I questioned a lot of things, and was trying to make sense of the world, and and some of the things I saw, and I searched a lot of things out. Really did a lot of research. Really did a lot of soul searching too. What I can say is this, and we can get into some specifics as we go along. I wouldn't want to just capitalize all the time here, because there's a lot that could be said as far as the evidence is as I see them. Ultimately, and most personally, is the relationship with Christ that I find to be, again, the most meaningful to me. But that doesn't mean there weren't external sources of information. There weren't external, considerations that I had searched out and came to a conclusion that the biblical worldview was the most reasonable, the most rational, and the correct worldview.
Gotcha. So so Jesse, for you, it was a journey. It wasn't really just kind of an all of a sudden epiphany that this is a truth and everything. But it was kind of a journey for you that your faith grew stronger more and more. And as you followed that faith and followed that desire and drive, would you say that that's what has strengthened your faith over the years?
I would say that it was a large part of strengthening my faith. Just here's the thing. Most people think that faith is blind, and I'm a fairly intellectual guy. I'm not going to toot my own horn or tell any of those things. Let's just say I'm a fairly intellectual guy, and I do a lot of reading, do a lot of study. And for me, I wasn't satisfied with a blind faith or just take this and believe it because I said so. And I really don't think anybody should be. I think that there's good evidence when you look into the scripture and when you look into the historicity of certain things. And when you look at even arguments from logic, I think there's very good reason. Paul says in Romans chapter 1 that God has made himself knowable through his creation. And I do believe that to be a real fact. But that whole journey did definitely strengthen my faith. But ultimately, I will attribute that again to God's leading as well.
Gotcha. So, Nick, a question I'd like to ask you is a lot of people, feel as Christians, myself included, that we feel that there is a completeness or a fulfillment within ourselves. As an agnostic or an atheist, do you feel any kind of emptiness? Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel anything is missing from your life?
No, it's kind of weird. So I grew up Catholic.
Okay.
So I haven't been atheist my whole life. I think it was probably mid high school, I would say, that I kind of started really questioning things and starting to explore stuff. And it kind of similar to is it Jesse?
Yeah.
Similar to you, where it wasn't an all at once kind of thing. It was definitely soul searching, figuring out what made sense, that kind of thing. And I think once I was a little more open to letting myself question those things, and then landing on the things that felt right, which you did as well. That made me feel good. I felt like I was being true to myself and what felt good to me.
Gotcha. So we have a viewer right now said, Justin says he's got a couple questions that he'd like to address to Nick. Nick, are you open to answering questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, awesome. So Justin, if you wanted to, you can just type your question into the comment box, or you can, call us at the number, the 618-507-9066, or just click on the link that I've just posted there, and you can actually even join the show live if you want.
Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Oh.
All right. So Justin's asking, what evidence would you consider sufficient in knowing God exists? And kind of where does your standard for, what is your standard for morality? And how do you know that you're really relying on showing and speaking and interacting with people?
Geez, Justin, thanks for stealing my whole script, man. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
Yes, it's been nice knowing you. Have a great night. No.
Yeah.
What evidence would you consider sufficient in knowing God exists? I guess I don't really know that answer. To be completely honest, I don't know. I don't know. I think I would need to know more characteristics that I would be able to test against. Everybody seems to have kind of a different understanding of what they think God would be. Some people think there's more than one. Some people go with the omnis, or the omnipresent, omni-powerful, that kind of thing. And some of those, there's problems with those. They kind of negate each other at certain points. So I think they've kind of revised it to maximally powerful, and that sort of thing. So I think I need more information in order to figure out what that would be. But for me, I guess maybe a better or clearer way would be saying what is not sufficient that I've seen or heard. Typically, it's appeals to emotion or personal experiences that people have had. And I'm not going to tell anybody that they didn't experience something. But I cannot have that exact experience that you had. That's a personal thing. That's why it's a personal experience. I'm seeing something different than you guys are seeing right now at this second. Our experiences are different. So while I value what people tell me about their personal experiences, and I trust that they interpret it that way, I can't know for a fact that that's actually what they experienced. And so his chat kind of disappeared, so I'm not.
I'll
could
throw
you
it back.
remind me what?
You got it.
Yep. There you go.
Okay. Where does his standard for morality come from? I guess it comes from understanding what I want out of life personally, and interacting with other people and valuing them, and their, mental and physical health. And I think that's kind of a subjective thing, is what you base your morality on. So that's what I base it on. But then the actions I take in response to that goal, those are not subjective. Those are objective. So Jesse and Chuck and sorry, what was your name?
Matt.
Matt. Okay. Oh, it's in the title of the show. So, anybody can base their morality on anything. If you're a Christian, you base it on God and the Bible, or something different if you have a different opinion on that. But I don't want to speak for you. Sure. But I base mine on well-being of others, and so there's objective actions I can take after that. Chopping your head off, that's not good for your physical and mental health. That's an objective fact. So and it's not always clear. Nobody knows all the answers to what would be moral in respect to that, but I think there are objective facts when it comes to it.
I'm really glad to hear you say that. Actually, that was one of the questions I was going to ask is, do you believe truth is objective or subjective? And I believe, if I'm hearing you right, I don't want to speak for you, Nick, but I believe you're saying you believe there are some objective truths that exist.
Yes.
Okay, very good. That's sometimes that's a large mountain to climb with people, because I do believe that there are objective truths out there. Obviously, I'm a Christian, and I believe that there are some objective things about reality that are true, and I believe the Bible reflects that. But when you look at something like the laws of logic, I don't know if you're familiar with those, but there are three. There's the law of non-contradiction, the law of the excluded middle, and the principle of identity. Basically, that non-contradiction. You can't be, if a statement is true about a proposition, then any other statement that would contradict that can't also be true. So, law of the excluded middle, that it's either got to be this or that. There's no middle ground sometimes on a proposition. And the principle of identity, something is identical with what it is. I think those are important to kind of clarify as well, because I don't want to come to you and speak to you from an emotional position. I would much rather talk to you from some of the logical areas that really spoke to me. And I'd be interested to hear your input on that. But let me just start out by being definitional about what I mean by God, because I want to be fair. You asked for definitions on that, so let me give it to you from my perspective. As I see the Bible revealing God, I believe him to be omniscient. You mentioned the omniscient, meaning all-knowing, all-powerful, and omnipresent. And I would say that God is, you use the term maximal. I believe that God is a maximally good being, meaning that he is perfect and holy, as the Bible would describe him. So those are words that I would use to describe God. I would also say that God is knowable and has made himself apparent in certain ways. And so, that being said, I think those are probably the basic fundamental attributes of God that most Orthodox Christians would agree on. And you said you were previously a Catholic, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm sure you're familiar with some of those terms then. Let me ask you this. One of the things I ask people when I'm speaking to them, Nick, is I ask them about their worldview. And we can get to the subject of morality in a little bit because I have questions about that. But I think that there are three tests that we can use when it comes down to looking at a worldview. And our worldview is all the beliefs that we hold that make up the way we see the world. And of course, everyone's worldview is a bit different. Of course, I argue for a biblical worldview. But when it comes down to a worldview, I challenge everybody listening to put your worldview to these tests. Is it coherent? Are there inconsistent beliefs that you hold within your worldview? If there are conflicting beliefs, you kind of gotta come to a reconciliation of that. Secondly, a test of correspondence. How do your beliefs actually correspond to reality? And then finally, I would say that there needs to be a test of existential relevance. And the question is, can you live with it? Is it really livable? And so that particularly plays out a lot of the time in questions of morality. So there are a few other questions that I would ask a person. So one of them would be the question of origin. Where did we come from? Meaning. What is our purpose here? The question of morality, of course, what's right and wrong, and who gets to say so. And then, of course, a question of destiny, like what happens after this, if anything at all. So, Nick, if I might ask you, can we just start there with origin? What do you believe about our origin?
Well, it's a scientific take on it. If you're asking about people specifically, or just matter in general,
let's just go with people, perhaps.
People, okay. I mean, I go with the explanation of evolution.
Okay.
And it's really just based on all the scientific facts that we have about that, common ancestry, and being able to trace genes, seeing progression in relationships of just things changing over time. I mean, we haven't stopped evolving. My son looks a lot like me, but he's not exactly me. Mm-hmm. And when he has children, they will look a lot like him, but even more different than they look like me. And so when you project that over a long period of time, things start looking very, very different. And it's not going to happen in 1 or 2 generations. It's going to be, hundreds of thousands or millions of years. So I guess if you're asking like how we got here, how it came to this point where we're talking over video and audio right now, it's basically a big filter of what type of life is going to be successful or successful enough to survive.
So do you feel you kind of believe in I guess it's the Darwinian theory of the what is it, survival of the fittest or something like that? Is that kind of what that goes along that path?
Kind of, but I mean, it's I kind of don't. What I'm hesitating on is people kind of relate that phrase "survival of the fittest" to social issues, how people interact with each other, and it's more of a environmental issue of, can I walk naked up to the Arctic and survive? No, I can't. I'm going to freeze at some point. But a polar bear, they would be able to survive up there. And they weren't always white. The bears are, black and brown and all different colors. But the white one was the one that did not get spotted by other predators. So it kept on producing offspring. It's that kind of simple idea that starts to create complex life.
On the complexity of life, particularly, this was one of those things that really spoke to me, looking at the complexity of life on Earth. One of the classical arguments, and I don't know if you're familiar with any of them, we have arguments for the existence of God. One of them being the teleological argument, meaning just an argument from the perspective of design. So when we look at a painting, I would say that's pretty scientific evidence that there was a painter who painted that. Or if you look at a building, that would be pretty scientifically you could draw a reasonably scientific inference that there was a builder who built that. And so when I look at the complexity of nature, particularly because the scripture speaks about this in Romans chapter 1, that God has revealed himself by what's been created, I see the magnificent diversity of creatures out there, and just the amazing complexity of certain different types of biological life. And it simply doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me personally, based on the research that I've done, and not just me. There are others. There are biologists and chemists and mathematicians out there, very, very highly regarded ones, to believe that time and chance sprinkled with enough luck, we could produce such complex things. Something like the eye, something like a human being, or even something as simple as the cellular automaton that exists. The little microscopic machines that work within our cells to keep things working. There are. Would you agree that there are systems in nature that are irreducibly complex?
Do you have examples? I'm not sure.
Okay, so when it comes down to you know what? I actually had a quote from a chemist, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And so, if you want to source it, you're more than welcome to. This came from the Scientific American, volume 27, on the origin of life on Earth. This is from Dr. Leslie Orgel. She said, "Neither proteins nor nucleic acid could have arisen without the other. And so, at first glance, one might have to conclude that life could never, in fact, have originated by chemical means." And so we see a system here. For life to evolve, we have to have both. We have to have proteins and nucleic acids. Of course, those are the building blocks of life. But in order for them to coalesce, so to speak, and to bring about life forms, you would have to have both existing at the same time. And so I see within that an element of design. I don't know. What do you think about that, Nick?
I can't really speak to the nucleic acid kind of thing because I'm not very versed in that, and I don't want to say anything that's false. But I think when you're talking about recognizing design, so my profession, I'm an architect. So when you're talking about designing buildings and, there's a designer behind them, I think we recognize design by contrasting it with things that occur naturally. We're all familiar with things that occur naturally. And then that's why when we start really looking at things that are complex in nature, we start going, whoa, that looks a little too complicated to be natural. But what are you doing there? You're comparing it to something that's natural. So, everything that you've seen in life, it has been designed in your mind. It seems like, everything ever is a part of a design. So I'm not sure how you'd be able to define it as that.
Sure. Well, I guess I'd ask this: what would you classify as elements of design? If you were to look at something, and you being an architect, what elements of design would you be looking for to say that, hey, there was an intelligence behind this?
A lot of times with design, there are there's faultiness. They don't always work. There's typically more than one function to them, but also I think simplicity is a hallmark of design. If you're going to design something, keep it as simple as possible. Don't overcomplicate it.
Sure.
So I'm going to take a quick break here real quick. I know that I think Mac is bursting at the seams there. I think he's got something that he kind of wants to maybe talk with both of you about briefly.
Well,
Mac, lay it on us.
Yeah, I'd just kind of like to interject for a second with, I hear the conversation. Do both of you believe, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but this is my thought process when I go through this, and I hear what you guys are talking about. do you believe in an intelligent design? Kind of like a guided evolution type theory, and I base that on myself with the wonder as I believe in God. I believe there is something supernatural out there in the atmosphere that is guiding the evolution, guiding the way we're moving. But I also look at, and I don't want to bring up anything. This has nothing to do with it. Once you hear it, I just think of the forming of a child in the mother's womb. How does each cell know where to go? How does each cell, know where to place itself? There has to be some kind of guidance there. So that just really, right. I mean, that just really makes me stop and think based upon what you guys are talking about, especially you, Jesse. Do you believe in a guided evolution type theory?
Sure. I'd like to define a couple of terms real quick just to answer that question, because I like to be very clear. There are two different types of evolution that we can talk about. We can talk about macroevolution, which is, to say that, there's a common ancestor, and every species that exists on Earth came from that one common ancestor. So fish eventually became, land creatures, perhaps reptiles, which eventually became mammals or whatever else. And then there is the belief in microevolution, which is the speciation, changes amongst species and within species and adaptation. I believe 100% in microevolution. I think we see evidence of that all the time, that there are variances within species. We see that in humans. We're not all the same color. I'm tan. Chuck is white. Mac, you're white. So
I am very white.
You can't see me, but I'm also very white.
Okay, well, I'll take your word for it, Nick. But we see this within dogs as well. You have Chihuahuas and Great Danes, but all of them have a common ancestor in their kind.
Chihuahuas come from demons. Let's be clear.
Yeah. and I believe the scripture speaks to this, that God created all things after their kind, not necessarily every variance of the species that we see. So, Nick, to your point, faultiness and functionality there, I believe that there is a built-in, we could talk about faultiness in a little while, but I believe that there is a functionality built in where there's adaptability within species. Of course, God, if he is all-knowing, which I believe he is, would know the paths that different creatures would take, and would know the changing nature of our climate and what would happen in this world. And so, of course, polar bears are white, and that's to their advantage. And so that there are some bits at play there. But even Darwin's favorite example of the finches, he observed that different finches on different parts of the island had different types of beaks. In a more recent study, we found that if you move those finches to another side of the island, within a couple of generations, their beaks revert back. So it's pretty interesting. So I would say that those are adaptations rather than full-on evidences of macroevolution. And so, yes, of course, I believe that God, that's an inbuilt trait into living biological organisms that are extremely complex. But the simplicity of such a design is beautiful, I would say, in that you can adapt to your environment, and then when that environment changes, you'll adapt again. But what we don't see, and what I'm still not convinced of, is we don't see many transitional forms. The evidence for those things is very, very limited. I know that scientific books and classes have drawings of these creatures, but a lot of those are based on conjecture. A lot of those are based on minimal fragments of bones. In fact, even for Denisovans and things of that nature, we don't really have many bone fragments of those things, or full skulls, or anything like that. In fact, the evidence for so-called transitionary forms, you could fit it into a suitcase. It's so small, so that there aren't really many transitional forms. And if macroevolution were to be true, one would suspect that you would see many different varieties of transitional forms within the fossil record. And so, to that end, I'm not a literal 7-day creation guy. I'll be upfront with that. That might come up. I believe that the Genesis account is is largely a polemic against Babylonian religion and other such religions at the time that refutes some of these statements of their gods. I don't think it's necessary that God created everything in a 7-day literal period of time. I think it tells us something about the nature of creation and who God is actually in relation to that. But beyond that, Mac, I do believe that there is a form of evolution at play. I would prefer to call it maybe adaptation, but we can call it microevolution, and that's I think that's clear.
So I'm one of those guys myself who I am a 7-day creationist. I do believe that that the earth was done 7 days and God did all this. I'm also a person who believes that God actually created a mature earth. That when God created trees, He didn't just create seeds and saplings that grew from one to the next. I believe He created fully mature trees. I believe He created baby trees and planted seedlings into the ground. Same with fully blown fish. And the reason I say that is because when we take a lot of the science that we have here, and there's a book that I read, I really enjoyed it, and it was called Answers in Genesis, which deals with a lot of what's termed biblical science. And it just kind of says that we know what the laws of science are because they were created at the beginning of time when God created the heaven and the earth. We know that a tree may be 1,000 years old because God would have created a 1,000-year-old tree, and we can determine what that was by studying His creation and breaking it down based on the laws of science that were laid down at that point. That's kind of my belief on it, because when you think about, Jesse, to your point about the forgive me, what'd you say earlier? Just kind of about, my mind went totally blank. I hate it when that happens. No,
Papa.
Right? I guess when we talk about, complexity of organisms, that's what I'm getting at. When you look at, just the complexity of a blade of grass, you look at the complexity of an apple, or the complexity of a human being, or even just the eye. For me, it would almost be like taking a 1,000-piece puzzle, turning it over and over and letting it fall to the ground millions of times, billions of times, and it's never going to fall together, locked perfectly in place at the same time. And then we look at, how, our cells are built. Just the structure of a cell, for me, is like, for me, it's evidence for intelligent design. And that's one of the things that I kind of, hold, that, gives me the belief in a creator, that, even if you take evolution in a stance, I do believe that there's, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, adaptability. I do believe in adaptability. For me, though, it's really hard to grasp the idea that all of this, like just looking around, if I look in my backyard right now, I see so many different things. I see grass, a lot of grass, and I see, like wood and, everything. It's just hard for me to believe that all that just happened, even if it was billions of years. To me, scientifically, it doesn't seem possible.
To speak to Nick's objection, and Nick, I do take your objection seriously. The objection that we as humans are almost we're almost programmed to find design in things because as a creative species we do create things, and so oftentimes we will compare nature to things that we've created ourselves. One of the things that really spoke to me the most was listening to speakers on the nature of DNA, and particularly microbiology and things of that nature. DNA is widely regarded and widely called a language by nearly everyone who works in that field. It is a code that we can understand, and language and intelligence never arises from non-intelligence. You don't see that anywhere. If I were to hand you a book, you would know that there's somebody who wrote that, especially if the images or if those symbols on the page conveyed an intelligible idea. You would have to rationally infer that there was an intelligent author behind that book. Now, I've read a lot of books. I question the intelligence of some of the authors, but still, they got across a point. And the point was knowable by me because those symbols were arranged in such a way that I could understand the ideas. And we're finding the same thing with DNA. DNA is the thing that really tells a human embryo how to develop. It tells a chicken to become a chicken. It tells any of these different species. It is the program. It's the blueprint, if you will, and that's so fascinating. So much so that it has been a converting factor for many people out of a strict materialist atheistic viewpoint. Not all of them have come to Christianity, but many have had to take a step back and go, wow, there must be some intelligence here that we don't know of. And so that spawned other ideas like transpermia, or there are other ideas about the nature of reality, such as simulation theory, which I think that those are both wild ideas in an attempt to supplant God, but that's of course that comes from my worldview. But I've spoken long enough. Nick, do you have any thoughts on that, man?
Yeah, I do. And when I'm not speaking, I'm listening to you guys and taking notes and stuff, and wanting, this is your show. I'm not going to interrupt you guys. So, I guess to your point of DNA. So maybe we'll work backwards from the most recent thing. I want to get to what Chuck said too. So DNA being a language, and I think that the intent when people were saying that it is a language, they were comparing it because it's supplying information. It's not necessarily giving a message, an intelligent message. It does have function, though. And in order for us to understand how it functions, we've applied, letters and things to it to identify each piece. And so when you're able to identify pieces of things and understand how it functions, it does look like a language.
Could I say that maybe language is a poor choice of word? I would say that DNA is probably more akin to a code.
It's probably a better word, maybe, but I think it's still the same idea. I think code and language both have an underlying intelligent kind of thing to it. And I don't know that I would agree that DNA is necessarily intelligent.
I wasn't asserting that DNA itself was intelligent, but that DNA carries out an intelligent function, meaning that DNA being the code that basically is the program for all life, and that DNA, as we learn more and more about it, as we decode the genomes of different creatures, we see just how true that is. That basically if you were a computer programmer, and you built a code for an AI, let's say, to progress and to learn, that would all be based off of that code. DNA functions in much the same way. In fact, almost in exactly the same way. It's very, very interesting. And so to me, Nick, as I look at that, I go, wow, that anything that any type of language or any type of code that conveys an intelligent function must, in my mind, it appeals to the idea that there was an intelligent creator behind that, because again, we don't see anywhere ever language or intelligent function arise from non-intelligence.
So yeah, I agree with that. You don't have intelligence from, well, yeah, I don't know that I do agree with that, actually.
Could you give me an example?
An example of
any time intelligence has arisen from non-intelligence?
Well, I mean, I think we've. I say we, and I'm talking about humans, and
sure.
All human contributions to the knowledge that we have. We've kind of figured out that intelligence does come from non-intelligence, because way back when there was no animals or things with brains, now there are. So, and we've traced the genomes back, that we've traced all of that back to little bacterium, one-celled amoebas, things like that were very, very simple at the beginning. They weren't complex. And, once those things start to change, once they start, from whatever it may be, the sun beating on it, and it causes some sort of mutation, or I don't know how that works, but the scientists do, and they're pretty convinced. And so, and I don't think it's a matter of them defying a belief in God and just on principle and saying that they believe that over the God explanation. I think the evidence has convinced them.
I could say that might be the case, but on the other side, there are many biologists, chemists, even mathematicians who have looked at the evidence and come to a completely different conclusion. To say that something like bacteria is not complex is a complete understatement. When you look at something like the cellular automata, the things that are within a cell that carry out basic functions within, they look just like machines on the atomic level. They're pretty amazing. You have things like the flagellum that functions like a motor and even has the stator and various parts, things that we could look at and go, oh yeah, I see how that works. And there's a clear design. And when you get down to it at that level, even at the very microscopic level, those things are still irreducibly complex. If you took one element out of that system, the system it ceases to operate. Yeah, it fails. And so I would say that I agree that there are people who have looked at the evidence and said, wow, I think this may be an elegant idea. Dawkins being one of those guys. I also think that that we as humans, we do carry agendas with us, of course, and I won't lie. I always have an agenda in speaking about these matters. But I do. My initial agenda at first was to get to truth, and I think that there is a reason that people want to seek out a life, absent from a creator. But if questions about that, we can talk about that at a later point. But that was just my counterpoint, Nick.
Mac, you look like you might have something on your mind over there.
Not real. I'm just listening to the back and forth of the conversation, and I'm really intrigued as far as Nick goes. And Nick, don't take this as an attack, because it's not. More of a questioning, I guess, is my experience, and I'll say that up front. My experience bases me upon saying some things to me just don't make sense, as far as, like I've said before, the cells knowing where to go as a child's being developed. Perennial flowers, how do they know to grow back? It's just questions like that to make me personally think there's got to be something out there. I mean, and I know you may not believe that, but you question, which kind of gives me pause to say, have you ever had that thought, or is it just I want to believe what I see?
Yeah, so I do have that thought. Like I was saying before, I am agnostic, and that informs my atheism. And it's not, and when I say atheism, and that's why I was trying to get the definitions kind of established first on what I mean by it,
sure.
Because there are a lot of atheists who think very different than I do. Mm-hmm. And so, it's kind of an individual level there. There's no dogma to atheism. The only requirement is that you just don't hold a belief in God. So, I'm open to any and all information I can possibly get.
Sure.
And then I assess the information, and if there's no way to if the answer to what question I have, or I can't draw a conclusion from the information I'm given, I can't make a decision on it. So,
Sure.
You know, sure, I do wonder if there's something out there more that, or that, you know, if somebody can say that here's 100% proof that there's a God, I'll say, you know, great, tell me more. You know, how, okay, and how do we know that? Okay, how do we know that? And, you know, it's always questioning.
Sure.
I think one of the really awesome things about that, though, is that there is questioning, like, because I think there's a time that some people will get to, well, I've already made up my mind. I don't care to hear anything else. I don't want to hear anyone else's opinion. This is it. There is no God, or this is it. You know, there is a God. You know, I think it's really important to continue questioning. And something that I find, yes, I'm going to say it. I have a saying the word interesting. Something I find interesting is that our conversation just kind of, you know, went from, you know, we were talking earlier about what we believe in that, and what we boiled it down to just in our conversation here is how things started, how things began, you know. And it's almost like, you know, we're talking about the building blocks of what, you know, Jesse, you and I would consider truth. And then, you know, then we also talk about, you know, questioning, you know, what is true, and that seeking of the truth. And I think that that's, you know, Nick, I appreciate you being open, you know, to other opinions, and hearing what is being said. And I just think that's really important. That has been a strong propellant in my faith, is always asking questions, and then I find the answers that I'm looking for when I continue to ask. So anyway, that's just kind of my 2 cents right there.
I think,
no, go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. It's kind of a silly analogy, but I think it might make sense. So when you see something in the sky and you say that's a UFO up there. Okay, so now we've said that's an unidentified flying object. Then you might have the same person say, it must then be an alien from outer space that built this machine and flew it from some other galaxy, and I was visiting Earth in front of me. So you went from like, that's something I don't understand, to an explanation immediately. And there was no way for you to know that that's actually what that was. You just thought, that's the best thing that I can think that it is. And so that's where I stop at, where I say, I don't know what that is. I stop and I say, I can't make a claim about it. I need to investigate.
Yeah, I think that's, I kind of held the same mindset at one point in time as well. And I think, again, questioning is healthy. I hold the scripture up to scrutiny because I believe it can stand up to it. But I think that there are things we can draw rational inferences from. If there weren't, we couldn't function as a species, obviously. In order to do anything, we have to be able to draw rational inferences, and we have to have some concrete base principles on which we can build on, or first principles, if you will. And so, yeah, Chuck, you mentioned that, you know, we kind of came back to origin. I think origin is very important. There are other questions that we could talk about. Meaning, is there a purpose in all of this, or morality, as Justin brought up earlier? All of those things are very important. But when we're talking about origins, I mean, that's where the Bible begins. Genesis, 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The Bible kind of begins there. And so I kind of like to begin there with a person just ask, what do you believe about the origins of things, and how does that inform your worldview moving on? Because it really is foundational. If you believe in a purely materialistic evolutionary paradigm, where there is no supernatural intervention, do you believe in the soul? What does that say about the meaning of life? If we're a cosmic accident on a rock floating through space that just kind of got here by happenstance because a bunch of matter coalesced back in way back when, billions of years ago, into an infinitely dense particle that then exploded outward. It begs the question of meaning. What does all of this mean then? Essentially, there would be no meaning, at which point that bleeds over into morality. If there is no meaning, and there is no objective lawgiver, then what basis do we have for making moral statements? Morality boils down to something subjective at that point. And so, as one of my favorite speakers used to say, some people say you should love your neighbor, and some people say it's okay to eat your neighbor. And which morality would you want to go by? I mean, it just there are. If morality in itself is subjective, then what basis do we have for justice or anything of that nature? And ultimately, that does lead us to the question of destiny. And so, I feel if you take that viewpoint, the only coherent, logical stance to take is to say there is nothing after this, and or if there it seems very hopeless. And I think that's the coherent materialist viewpoint, and that's been expressed by folks like Dawkins and Hitchens and others who I've listened to. I've read their books, and I found them to be. I didn't find them offering anything hopeful at all. And so, Nick, I don't know if you have anything to say to that end, but that's why I like to begin at beginnings.
I do, and so I think that's kind of a misconception. On, and I can really only speak for myself on how I view things, but I don't think that just kind of a depressing worldview after deciding that you don't think there's a God. I don't think that's the logical conclusion. Some people do conclude that way. Some people do get depressed about it. But there's other ways to think about it, and I don't know if I'm going to get an afterlife, but I know that I have this one. And so I'm going to do my best to enjoy this, have the most positivity I can, take care of this place that's taking care of me, and take care of all of the people around me, because I value myself and I value other people as well. They're just like me. They have experiences just like me. They experience pain and suffering. And I know from experience that those are not pleasant things. And I would never want anyone else to feel that way. And this is my only chance, as far as I know, to ensure that that doesn't happen to, as many people as I possibly can affect.
Sure. So, what I should have said is, I think that ultimately the worldview is hopeless. Not in that it always leads to depression. I would say that there are many atheists who have described themselves as existentially fulfilled at this moment in time. My point was that the end of it seems to be hopeless to me. Secondly, though, I do have a question, Nick. You had mentioned that you do have this life, and I agree that we only get one go around at life, and we should make the most of it. I think we have a duty to do so. My belief in that is rooted in my faith, and that my fellow humans are made in the image of God. They have intrinsic value, and that's why I value their lives, because I recognize the value in them. Where do you get the sense of value in your fellow man outside of that? Not to say that I agree with you that they have value. I'm not saying anything about that. What I'm saying is, where does that sensibility come from, in your opinion, Nick?
I think, to your point of not really knowing where things originate and the, if there was a motivation behind it or not. So I can't speak to like an intrinsic thing bestowed upon me to value those things, or my brain works a certain way because there was intent behind it. But I'm able to feel empathy for other people. I'm able to put myself in their shoes, and know that I basically function in a similar way to all other people, and even animals like dogs. They're a social species, and they have feelings. All things with nerves have feelings. They can feel pain, and they can experience that, and it's a negative thing. does not feel good, and with the exception of some people, I'm sure. But you know, that's where I get that from, is, you know, I experience good things, I experience bad things, and I know that there's a world full of people who are able to do the same thing.
Would you say that? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Nick.
Oh no, you're good. Go ahead.
I was going to say then. So you would say that your I guess your standard there of empathy, I'll call it, or maybe even a moral standpoint, is fairly subjective based on your ability to experience things and the experience of others. Is that what would you agree with that statement?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Very good.
That's kind of what I was thinking as he was explaining that, is that maybe, you know, it's derived from experience, and that experience. I like the word that you use, Nick, empathy and empathize. You know, so that's kind of what I was thinking, is like from experience and being able to relate to how other people feel, and you want to spare other people their feeling, you know, their hurt feelings or physical or emotional pain.
So, Nick, earlier you mentioned, though, that you do believe that there are objective standards for morality too, and I believe you mentioned murder, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. Where do you think those objective standards come from? That would be a real question. This was probably the most, I guess, when I did soul searching, when I was really, you know, thinking through this for myself, I did ask myself those questions. What basis for morality or standards of objective morality do I actually have if I divorce myself from a moral lawgiver? And so let me just ask you the same question, Nick. Where do you think those objective standards come from?
I think they're just rooted in just how things function. So if I'm concerned, which I am, about everyone here, whether they're happy or sad or healthy, you know, what my example was earlier, if I chop your head off, your well-being is compromised then. You know, you're not going to be alive anymore. Or if I chop your arm off, you're probably not going to die, but you're not going to have an arm and it's going to hurt. And so those are objective facts. Those are,
sure,
you know, we know those would be true statements. And
sure,
so that's you know, the basis of the morality there being your well-being. That's a subjective foundation.
I guess my question would be,
there's objective facts about it.
Sure. I guess my question would be even deeper than just the objective reality of, like, if you chop my head off, of course I'm dead. That's not good for my well-being. I guess my further question would be, why does my well-being matter if there is no objective, if there is no, let's say, why is there an objective standard that my well-being matters? Let me phrase it that way. And I guess that's what I would get at, even deeper than just the objective reality of pain or anything else. Why does my well-being matter, or the well-being of any other conscious creature?
So I think that's going to vary from person to person, because it is a subjective thing. And, you know, not everybody in the world bases their morality on well-being, but I think it's a general kind of basis, you know. And I don't want to speak for you, so I'll speak for myself from when I was Catholic. I knew that what God was saying in the Bible was, you know, this is God's law. This is what he wants. These are, you know, the lists of commandments. These are things that he's saying are good. And they're going to be good whether he said them or not. And if you look at it through a lens of, is that beneficial to this person's well-being? Because the things that God is saying in the Bible, the commandments, you know, that's typically in line with that, other than, you know, don't have any other gods before me, honor thy father and mother. That those kinds of things are less about well-being, but I think they're relevant if you do believe in God. Maybe not the, you know, father and mother thing, but they're not directly linked to the well-being thing. And I think they're only relevant if you do believe in God and you have a Christian worldview. So I guess what I'm trying to say is typically the things that I held as morals when I was Catholic pretty much align with how I feel now. And I mean,
you kind of feel
sure
that they're just, Nick, do you kind of just feel that they're just all around good rules to follow, whether they're biblical or not? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
The love thy neighbor as thyself, golden rule kind of thing, that was established way before Christianity. That was an idea that just all people, kind of shared in general. You share space with people. You have to live cooperatively. We're a social species. We depend on each other. And it kind of is just a result of that.
I would say that statement actually existed. I agree with you. It did predate Christianity in its negative form, and it was often stated, "Don't do anything to others that you wouldn't want them to do to you."
Right.
I think Jesus took it and he reframed it, and he said, actually, you should take a more positive step, and you should do for others the things that you would want them to do for you. Nick, to your point about morality, there, it seems to me that's a pretty subjective standard based on a person's ability. Whereas I come from a stance where I believe that there are things that are true objectively, whether existing outside of our comprehension or not, and I think that there are things that are right and wrong that exist outside of our ability to comprehend necessarily, whether they're right or wrong. And to that end, I would say that to that end, we talked about science quite a bit earlier, and science could tell me, objectively speaking, that if I cut your head off, so to speak, it would be bad for your well-being because you would die. Science couldn't tell me why it would be wrong to take that action. And so that's kind of where I'm getting at the greater truth behind that all. And I've seen this played out in questions asked to university students who took a completely subjective view of truth and reality. There was a student who said, who was asked, "Hey, if I brought a baby up on the stage and I were to put a knife through its heart and split it from, stem to sternum, would that be wrong? And why?" And when confronted with the coherency of their worldview on subjective morality, they weren't able to say, "Well, it's objectively wrong." I would say it's wrong, but I can't tell you it's objectively wrong. And I thought that was absolutely frightening, actually. But I'm not saying that's who you are, Nick. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying I believe that's the coherent end of that worldview. That when everything is subjective, force rules the day, unfortunately. And so, in that regard, I actually think we've seen that play out a few times in humanity.
So I agree that when you have a subjective foundation for your morals, then you do risk people basing their morals on things that are not beneficial for the rest of us.
Sure.
So there is that risk, but I think that's kind of just how it might just work. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if there is a God, it may or may not be the Christian God. It may be one that we haven't even thought of yet. And I think where I'm at with things is I can't put God into the equation of things and attribute things to him if I can't prove first that he even exists in the first place. So, like if something's, I don't know, I'm not really sure how to go from there. So I've heard an analogy before. I think this might fit here. It's called the puddle analogy. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, where you've got a pothole in the road and it starts to rain. And imagine you're the water. You're sitting in this puddle and you're going, "Wow, this is made just for me. I fit so perfectly. Somebody must have designed it this way and intended it this way." That must be a God. And it's like, well, it was not really a design. It's just, these cars were driving over, this big snowplow came by and took a chunk out of the road. And that's just how water works. It just sits in whatever hole there is. There's no intention if it is, but it seems like it there was. And so I feel like people see what they think is something that's intended and then say, well, God exists. And then that starts to affect everything else in their life, where they're saying, you know, morals can't exist without God because God is X, Y, and Z, all these attributes. But I don't ever see any real way of being able to know that that's a fact, that God really is true and real, and then take the step further to just base all of my decisions off of that.
So to that end, I'm sorry, Chuck, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're fine. I do have a question just so I can kind of clarify, make sure I understand correctly. The puddle analogy you gave, would you say that people kind of see something, they, in your opinion, the way you're seeing it, people see something, they like it, it feels good, it feels great, they say it's just for me, so they start making assumptions around their current situation that then feeds into what you have described as an unexplainable belief. But you know, there's maybe something out there, I don't know what it is, but this feels good right now, this feels right to me, and so it must be the truth. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, and I it is, but I also don't think that that's necessarily wrong. I wouldn't knock anybody for it. I just don't feel like I'm compelled or justified in holding a belief if I don't have anything like evidentiary or demonstrable to support it. Like if I had some experience right now where there was a blinding light and I heard a voice and all that, and that's my experience, and I say that was God, I can't prove that to you. I mean, you might believe me because you already believe in God and it might support what you believe, but I can't, there's no way for me to really just prove that that actually happened. And so that's why, like, I value people's personal experiences, because I can put myself in those shoes. I just imagined that situation, and I would be frustrated if people didn't believe me because it just happened to me. But I also realized that it's not convincing if I just tell you it.
Sure.
It's a very big, crazy experience that just we don't really see happening day to day. Like, you know, I can tell you I have 2 dogs downstairs. You probably would believe me. People have dogs. But if I said there's 2 unicorns out in my garage, that's a pretty big claim, and nobody's ever seen unicorns, and you probably would be like, well, yeah, I don't believe that.
I'm going to ask you for your address, Nick.
Okay.
Well, to that end, can I I just want to interject for a minute and
sorry if I ramble. I have ADD.
No, that's all right. I ramble too, and I just, you know, I do it for a living sometimes. So, to the puddle analogy, let me just say this: I take your point there that we oftentimes search for meaning in what could otherwise be meaningless circumstance. People do that, but what if you were to come across a puddle that was exactly the shape of your body, exactly that size? That was so perfectly designed, you fit exactly into it. I think in that regard, you would say somebody designed this with me in mind. And so I think where the puddle analogy lacks is it doesn't take into account the complexity. It is a cute analogy for some things when it comes to again finding meaning in meaningless circumstance. But I think it lacks it doesn't take serious the complexity of where we are, or even the fine tuning of our universe. And yeah, I was just listening to a debate with Dawkins in it earlier today, and he, when asked about the fine tuning and asked about the specific situation that would have to arise to give rise to life according to the theory of evolution, he said, it was just kind of a Goldilocks situation. And I thought to myself, that sounds like a cop-out to me. It just sounds like he wouldn't acknowledge the fact that things are so perfectly aligned for that to become a reality. And I think the puddle analogy lacks there in that regard. But moreover, Nick, I heard you say that you believe in the process of evolution, probably despite the fact that you've never seen evolution in action, and despite the fact that we may have some common genetic material with other creatures, but you've taken the word of scientists on that, I assume, and it seems to me that maybe you're holding a different standard of proof for God. And I would say that evolution and God are equally outrageous claims, if you want to call them outrageous claims. And so I would just ask you whether you've considered that or not. It was a question I had to ask myself at one point in time. Do you think there is a standard of evidence big enough that could ever prove God's existence to you?
So I think it depends on how you define God.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say that God is supernatural, then that by default takes him out of the realm of being detected by science. Because science investigates the natural world. And if science could detect God, then it would just mean he's natural. It wouldn't be supernatural at that point. I think supernatural is kind of a misnomer. So as far as scientific evidence or physical evidence, I don't know, but
Okay.
I feel like God would know. And I feel like God knows everything, right? He's all knowing. Wasn't that one of the attributes you had said earlier?
Yeah, as revealed.
Yeah. So he knows the outcome of everything, any event ever that's ever going to pass. So he created the world. He created me, knowing that I would be atheist. And when I die, what you had said earlier, if I'm not a follower of Jesus, then I'm not saved. God did that knowing. He made a choice to create it that way, knowing that was going to be the outcome for me.
Sure.
Yet I'm still sitting here living a life that I feel is a positive impact on everybody. And, I'm not really sure what the point of that is. Maybe there's something that I don't understand about it.
But Nick, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to get this point across, and I don't know if anybody else would agree with me when I say this. Excuse me, which is we do have free will, and Jesse, I think you might be able to touch this better than I would, but God gave us free will to seek Him out. Is that a correct statement?
So what I would say is this. Number one, the will is a hotly contested issue amongst many different people, even amongst Christians. There are Christians who are determinists. There are atheists who are determinists. There are atheists who are free will advocates in the libertarian sense. Myself, I'm more of the belief that we have a will that we can that we can exercise. And God does say in various places, if you seek me, you'll find me. But also it says in the scripture that, no one comes to Christ except the Father draws him to. Nick, to your question there, what might be the greater point here? What would be the point in God creating people that he knew would reject him? I'll say this, and this is an imperfect, let me just say up front, this is an imperfect analogy, but you mentioned that you have children, and you know that this world is a harsh place, and that by, bringing children into the world, they're going to be subjected to evils and difficulties and hardships, yet you chose to do that anyway because you love those children, I would assume. And I would say that there's something akin to that God wanted to create because he loved, and he wanted to be loved in return. And in order to be loved, there has to be a choice, in my opinion. And so we get to make that choice. I think it's beautiful that we even have a choice, according to Christianity. And so when it comes down to it, though, the truth of the matter is that God is also in the Bible revealed as holy. And the word holy just means separate and other than. And so he's separate from he's separate from us in many ways, standing outside of space time, as you said, supernatural, Nick. And I do accept that God is a supernatural being. being that he stands outside the natural order because he would have to in order to create the natural order. But also that means that he is perfectly righteous, and moral and righteous are different things, actually. A person may commit an act with a good purpose in mind, but that act may still be against the law. And so I would say that the same is true as God reveals things, and that he has determined that there was a way that people could come to him, as it's revealed in the Bible, and that would be through Christ. And it actually doesn't require any specific performance on the part of a person, as the gospel says. In fact, that word gospel, it means good news, and the good news is that it actually doesn't depend on you. It's actually based on what God has done, and the only thing that's required of us is the faith in that. So, of course, that's the whole of my that's the whole center of my belief. Of course, in Christianity, it circles around Christ and his atoning work on the cross. But well, I guess I'll just stop there and see if you have any questions about that.
Yeah. So a couple of things. We were talking about God is all knowing. He's all powerful. He could have created everything in a different way, where there was no evil. It was just good experiences. And I get the value of going through hardships, so that there can be a positive outcome at the end. But if the positive outcome is the goal, why not just create the positive outcome without all the rest? And it's this kind of, it goes back to what you mentioned about Jesus dying on the cross. He needed to kind of pay the toll for everyone's sins, and this was God's sacrifice so that he could forgive us for his sins. He didn't need to create that system. And also, if I commit a crime against you, Jesse, you can't then just say, well, Chuck will go to jail for it and you're forgiven, Nick. So it just doesn't make sense to me in that sense, where Jesus paid the price for everybody else and now we're able to be forgiven. He could have just forgave us. I don't know why Jesus needed, that Jesus was him.
It's so there are a few elements there. God did set into place a system of sacrificial atonement. That is true, and I think this is conjecture on my part, but I think the heart of that is that God created man with essentially perfect in the beginning, and then there was a fall. And when man fell, death entered into the system. And so he said that was the penalty for that sin, that penalty for the rejection of his truth was death. And death came with the consequence that it would, spread to all men, as the scripture says. And as a result, we were cut off from immortality. And as a result of that, we became lesser. In fact, the beginning of the story of the Bible is actually a story of perfect communion between God and man. There's an idyllic garden. God communes with man, and there's unbroken fellowship. It's actually man who moves and breaks fellowship. And God says, okay, as a result of this, you've fallen from in immortality, you've fallen from a standard of holiness. You've made a choice, and so the penalty of that is that you are now mortal, and as a result of that, things became more fallible. But the price to pay was death. Man essentially actually took his own life, and life had to be life for life. Essentially, was the system. But all of that pointed to something greater, that actually God did love his creation. And as you mentioned, Christ, according to Christianity, is God incarnate, and it was God taking the penalty upon himself, actually, so that no other human life would have to be taken, but his own incarnation. It was an extreme act of love, according to the scripture. And to speak to people being punished in another person's place, it's a little bit different than that, a little bit more nuanced. God said the penalty for there would be no forgiveness of sin without the shedding of blood, and we can dive into that a little more if you like. But there was a penalty to pay, and the Bible says that the wages of sin is death, and so a wage is something you earn, and so if you go to court. Say you're convicted of a crime, you go to court, and the judge levies a fine against you, and he says your fine is, $5,000. Chuck could very well come forward and pay the $5,000 for you, because that's the wage of your that's the wage you've earned for your crime. That's what you have to pay. And so there is a little bit of a different nuance there.
But is that a moral thing though, for Chuck to take that for me, or should I have owned up to my own sin?
Sure. That's what the good news is it's Jesus is stepping in and saying, listen, because I have care for this person, because I have care for all people, really, I'm willing to pay the price here. And it's an act of pure mercy. And actually we would describe that as grace, God's pure and unmerited favor, something we don't actually deserve. So yeah, actually, Nick, to your point, you really should have to own up for your crimes. And Chuck really shouldn't pay the price for you. But if he does, it's an act of grace. He doesn't have to do that.
It's really a hard concept to understand sometimes.
Well, it's a concept that a lot of Christians have a problem wrapping their minds around. Christians get caught up in specific performance, but grace is at the heart of the Christian message.
Well, and don't get me wrong, I would be very grateful for Chuck's paying my fine, but I think a better lesson to me would be that I pay that myself. And grace is kind of the suspension of justice, it seems like, and God is just and grace at one time, and to me that is a contradiction. And that's kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of all this, with the laws of logic and non-contradiction and all of that.
Well,
do you have a thought on that?
I do, actually. I would say that grace isn't the absence of justice. I would say it's the suspension of a sentence, which is well within the rights of a judge to do. I've gone to court before because I had a traffic ticket, and the judge looked at my record and said, well, this is the only thing you've got going on here, so I'm not going to take your license or anything like that. I'm not going to give you a fine. I'm just going to let you go with the warning. You've stood here. You've heard the charges against you. I'm going to dismiss them this time. He didn't have to do that. It was an act of grace on behalf of the court, but well within the rights of the judge to make that decision. And so I would say that back to the standards of not just morality, but justice as well. I think that justice is within the realm of the judge to decide what is just or unjust. In our system, of course, we have rules that we've agreed to as a society. But when it comes down to it, if God is the just moral lawgiver, I would say that he has the ability and the right to decide when he could exercise grace or not. And so the message of Christianity is just that, though, Nick, that we all are guilty before a holy God, and we all rightfully would pay the penalty of death, both physical. We will pay that penalty. I mean, we will die, all of us. But then
no one's getting out alive.
Yeah, no one's getting out alive. But of course, I believe in the afterlife, and the Bible describes a state of spiritual death as well, separation from God, separation, and that's a terrible thing. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Hate to interrupt you, but I got to put my kid in bed and my phone's on 2%.
Oh my, man.
I do want to say something quickly. Thank you guys for having me on. I'd love to keep talking with you. I'd love to be on again at some point, but
absolutely.
And everything you're saying, Jesse, makes sense with the foundation that you already believe that God exists. But I think there's a lot of added detail to that based on something that we can't prove exists in the first place. So to add even more complicated and intent and detail around it is where I struggle, where
sure.
I'm listening and I'm going, yeah, that makes sense. But then I reel myself back and I go, I don't even know if this exists in the first place. So where am I going with this? And So that's kind of where I'm at, and
Sure.
that's always where I come back to. And I think, in my mind, if I live a good life, if I live it with good intent, I'm doing what Jesus wants me to do anyway. So I don't know if just the belief in him is what's important rather than doing the good things that he would tell you to do anyway.
Well, Nick, I want to say I appreciate your openness and honesty here. You've been nothing but cordial with me, and I'd love to continue the conversation sometime, even if you just want to reach out to me personally. I'd love to. I don't know if you're in the area. I don't know where you live, and I won't ask you that on air, but if you want to reach out to me, man, I'd love to take you to lunch and just talk about it some more. And I would follow up with this, that I think we would have to take Jesus at his word, rather than maybe our subjective understanding of what he might want us to do. But I think he was pretty explicit in what we should do. And I'll just say that. But Nick, man, I really have enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking with you guys too. Thanks.
Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being on. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Jesse, thanks for hanging out. 45 minutes after the hour.
Listen,
I'm surprised Cherry's still awake.
Listen,
I'm
I'm pretty
not
sure.
9:30 yet, so
Don't give me a microphone.
Cram it, both of you.
Don't give you a microphone. Is that what you said, Jesse?
I'm a preacher. Don't give me a microphone. I'll talk forever.
I think this lasted longer than some of the sermons on Sundays, man.
Oh, here it comes.
I think you could probably take this Sunday off, right?
We'll just play the show. How does that sound?
We'll play the show. No, no, we've got something else in store for Sunday, but we're actually going through the Book of Acts. But no, really, I really did enjoy talking to Nick, and Nick, if you're still listening out there, still love to make a connection sometime.
Yeah, I've known Nick for a while, so I can probably put you guys in touch together. And I mean, I appreciate you being on, and I think that you're both very cordial with one another and respectful. And
I really appreciated the conversation and the flow of it. Nobody interrupted anybody. Everybody listened to every point that one person wanted to make, and really soaked it in, Jesse. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I always enjoy it.
Absolutely. We look forward to it.
Jesse, you want to tell us again real quick before we go, just kind of what's going on this weekend?
Sure. Again, this weekend, we're going to have our gator cookout. And you heard me right. We are cooking an alligator on our giant monster grill at the church. That'll be this Saturday. We're also doing crawfish boil. We'll have some other sides. We're going to have brats and stuff out there too. We'll have games. We're going to do some axe throwing. And thankfully the weather's going to be good, but that'll be this Saturday at Celebration Community Church, 2301 Orville Avenue in Granite City. And we'll be beginning around noon. So come out and get you some gator and some crawfish.
Local legend I've heard is that Chuck actually wrestled that gator that you're cooking on Saturday.
Is that local legend?
That's local legend.
If that wasn't the case, it'd be a Chuck roast and not a gator.
Chuck roast. Hey-o.
I'm here all week. Tip your waitresses and try the fish.
That's good.
Again, thanks a lot, Jesse. We hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
Yep, you guys too. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a long one tonight, huh?
Yeah.
That's what she said.
Tis what she proclaimed.
Awesome.
Mr. Time Bomb enjoyed the show tonight, so you guys must have done something right. Yeah.
I guess so, because isn't he normally in the background cussing and like
Usually.
How much he hates it?
Yeah.
With the exception of running out for a cigarette, I listened to the entire show.
Wow, nice.
And we appreciate that, Mr. Bomb.
There you go.
I'm impressed.
First time for everything.
Everyone, thank you very much for tuning in and sticking with us tonight.
Long time listener, first time caller.
So next week, Mac and I are going to be recounting our tales of concert going, and we'll be doing talking about concerts we've been to, concerts we enjoyed, and also concerts we're going to, which I think we're both going to a concert here in July, right?
You're going to that now?
I'm going, yeah. I've been told
Is the Offspring taking you?
She is. I've been told that it's my birthday gift.
Well, then we will have to meet up at said concert and rock out to Poison like we did that one time.
Dude, I just hope the guy that was there last time was there.
In front of us, rocking out again.
Oh my gosh. That guy.
There's a story behind that, folks.
I feel left out.
Tune in next week and you'll hear that story, I'm sure.
Yes, you will. Because,
all right, guys.
Because we're going to throw it out there because it was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, it was really something else. So yeah, join us next week for the concert show, and the week after that, the plan is to do a local spirits, wine, bourbon, and beer show. So if you know a local craft brewery or someone like that wants to be on, come and join us. We do have a couple people that have signed up already.
And Terry's going to be taking shots the entire show.
So this is one she has to be on camera for.
I want to see it.
I just need a few hours to prepare my insides.
There you go.
And my outside.
Eat lots of bread. Bring oyster crackers.
There you go.
Eat lots of bread.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight. Catch you next week, 7 o'clock on Wednesday. Peace out.
Bye.
Deuces.